Hello, Tew. This is our third meeting.
And here in Evia.
Here was the first one we talked about. The first one we talked about your life journey in the practice.
Mm-hmm.
In the second one in Corfu, we talked about how to transform fear and grief.
Right.
And the suffering in order to live with peace in the heart.
Yes.
So today I'd like to go a bit deeper on how to live fully in a world without being consumed, which should be at the very heart of the Bodhisattva ideal. So my first question is, what is a Bodhisattva? Because they consider it like a mythical and an unattainable figure. How would you describe it to someone who doesn't know anything about Buddhism? And
Well, I kind of wish that I could, without reference to a term, to a term which is alien to Western language, because Bodhisattva is a Buddhist term, as you know, and it's a term which, is very deeply embedded in the Buddhist path. But before I come to the term, I feel that it's a term which is relevant and useful to the times we live in. Bodhi means knowing. Really, it just means conscious, knowing in terms of conscious, not intellectual knowing, not cognitive knowing, but knowing. Wisdoms, it's sometimes, but you see, wisdom is, you see the difficulty in language, wisdom, and then you've got a wise person. Knowing is consciousness. So, it's in you, it's in me, it's in the trees, it's in the animals, this knowing, this essential part of consciousness, which is not even personal. Sattva is being. And again, it's not just human being. So Bodhisattva is the knowing being, or the part of being that knows, that is conscious. And implied in all that is that it's a transpersonal consciousness, it's a universal consciousness as well. And this Bodhi also means essence. Essence. The essence of everything is imbued by this consciousness. You see how difficult it is to talk about, So Bodhisattva is a being that is imbued with this essence of knowing, of consciousness. Okay? Look what a mouthful it is in English, So you go around saying, being imbued with consciousness. But Bodhisattva is a phrase I have to go around explaining it. But what I insist on is that it's not confined to people who follow the Buddhist path. This is the whole point. I think it's a universal notion, that everything is conscious and we are conscious. Why I feel that it's so important is all that is implied in the notion of this being, the spiritual being, who, this is an extension, but one of my first teachers, he really coined the term spiritual warrior, which is not exactly the translation, but I've always stuck with that, because warrior, in this sense, the paradox of using the word warrior is a warrior, a spiritual warrior, is somebody committed to doing no harm and contributing to healing and peace in the world, right? So this is the whole point of using that phrase, is turning the whole notion of warrior from somebody who's going to wreck the world and kill people off and have enemies and things to something quite the opposite, which is somebody who supports other people, who is compassionate, who is guided by the qualities, the real qualities of what it means to be a warrior, to be courageous enough to try and live in peace and not to do harm. So that's why I really like the term spiritual warrior.
So, what does a bodhisattva do?
What does the Bodhisattva do? Drinks coffee, drinks wine. Nothing special, and this is important, like, again, when you use a term like that, again, it's one of the things the same teacher warned against, not to kind of have a label sticking, I am a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is first of all, is you're not doing, rather than
Being.
trying to get to this level of being, right? So it's not conforming to a recipe, like a bodhisattva does this and this and this. It's really a question of exploring the potential of your being. And you started off by saying how to live well. How do we live well? How do we live well? How do we maintain our integrity? How do we live honestly and bravely, right? Without doing harm, and supporting other people, and so on, guided by compassion. So there are 10, we call it the 10 qualities of a spiritual warrior. But again, you see, it's not qualities that you say, you tick off. You say, oh yes, I'm generous. Yes, I'm compassionate. Yes, I'm patient. The qualities are more like questions, right? You go towards, you keep exploring this in your own self and in your own behavior. So when you say, what does a spiritual warrior do? He or she is conscious. That's the bodhi part, the bodhisattva, That's the bodhi part. He's conscious of everything, Not in that obsessed way of being like, am I, am I sinning? Am I, and anything like that, and the guilt. But this consciousness of what's going on, in your interaction with the world. There's no kind of rules. It's more like a continuous questioning of what you're doing, but not. It's very hard to kind of talk about without sounding like there's a kind of recipe here, There's not a recipe. There's just a series of questions which are dependent on these qualities. So, for example, if you are going to try to be a sentient being, a conscious being, then you need some help here. You need some help. And the help is very simple. The help is to go through qualities that make us, and not just us humans, but make all beings, you know, realize their own being. But in terms of the human being, in terms of our human interactions, we call them the 10 qualities, which include generosity, uprightness, dignity, sacrifice, intelligence, energy, patience, honesty, perseverance, determination, commitment, kindness, loving kindness, and courage. See, equanimity. So these are 10, And in the way that I have lived it, I have tried, and I'm still trying, to live this life as a sentient being, chanting this. It's not chanting a recipe, but chanting this as a kind of reflection, on things I have to keep on working on, you know. And this is the whole point. It's not of the path, of the Bodhisattva path, if you like. It's not a given, you know. We had this conversation in the car yesterday when you said, can artificial intelligence be a Bodhisattva? And it's not such a ridiculous question, because artificial intelligence provides everything these days. You want to see what, if you looked it up, you say, how can I be a bodhisattva? The artificial intelligence will tell you. See? But that's the whole point, It can't tell you because it's not a sentient being,
So this is the next question. What's the difference between wanting to help and genuinely embodying the spirit of Bodhisattva?
Well,
So the artificial intelligence wants to help,
yes.
but he cannot genuinely embody the spirit of Bodhisattva. This is the difference you were talking about.
Well, first of all, artificial intelligence can't give you a big hug, can't offer you a glass of wine. It can tell you maybe, that you should do that, but it's in the doing. It's in the interaction, and not just between humans, but between you and an insect, between you and an animal, between you and a tree. Artificial intelligence can't do this. It doesn't have the flesh to do it. It doesn't have the vibration. It can give you a formula. It's the difference between a formula and the actual doing, is a world apart.
No, but a part of the artificial intelligence, which was a joke, the difference between someone who wants to help,
Yes.
who is helping,
Yes.
but maybe has different motives, and someone who genuinely embodies the spirit of Bodhisattva. There's a difference. How can you tell?
Well, how can you tell is that, there are many people who are living like bodhisattvas who didn't necessarily go around chanting the 10 qualities, but embody it. I would say that the late Jane Goodall was one, for example, as a public figure. There are many, many people, she happens to have been a public figure, but many people who I've worked with in the slums in Bangkok, they're bodhisattvas. They don't necessarily do the practices, that I encourage people to do, to remember to do this. But they're living it. Now, what's the difference between somebody who just wants to do it and somebody who does it? Well, that's the point. You don't just want to be. You have to put it into action. You have to live it. It has to be lived. And to live it sometimes takes a certain risk, and takes a certain courage to live it, to the people who talk truth to power, who talk truth to powerful politicians, it takes courage to do that. The people who are in the war zones now, volunteering and things like that, you live it, you see. And most of the people who live it, you know, they're not doing it so that people can say, oh, what a great person he is or she is. Most of the time, they kind of feel a little useless, you know, in the sense that why is there still war? Why is there still all this suffering, you know? And you kind of, I read somewhere that a bodhisattva, this is in modern times, there was an article on a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is somebody who is passionately in love with a world he or she cannot fix. So there's this sense, you do your best, right? But you never kind of say, I'm going to save the world, or you do this so that people can look at you and say, well, what a great person this is. You do it knowing that you're actually going against something as well, you know. Goodness, is a very difficult thing to sustain, particularly in the world in which we're living, where the values are so kind of set in consumerism and achievement, you know, dominance, all these kind of things that are part of education, even, you know, from very young. You know, our attitude to each other, to nature, you know, you're the winner or you're the loser, and all this dualistic sort of pain that people go through. So trying your best to be generous and peaceful and loving and honest and courageous in all this, you know, is not following a formula, you know, and there's no tick and there's no one to say, good, you earned your way to heaven now or whatever, you know. You do this from a very deep place, and the deep place you do it from is love, you know.
What would the modern Bodhisattva look like? Would he be recognized today, or would he go unseen?
Well, the best thing is that the modern bodhisattva, unless by, I don't know what you would call it, you know, by chance or by destiny, you end up like Jane Goodall, let's say, who has an incredible influence, even in her death, on young people, and talking about hope and talking about commitment and everything. But I think most bodhisattvas, most of the ones I've known, are practically invisible. And that's the whole point, you know. You don't have to be visible. You just quietly remember to follow the path, you know, and you just do it quietly without wanting gain and applause or anything. That's the whole point. There's no sort of badge to it.
What are the greatest obstacles that prevent people from living with an open heart?
Fear, mainly. Fear. And once again, you know, I refer back to my background and my training, you know. In Buddhism, we call fear the unhealthy root of what happens. There's two things, fear and desire, you know, and they're very connected. Fear and desire to be somebody you're not, to have something you haven't got, to have more, whatever it is, you know. And that's really, actually, the fear is behind that, the fear of being no one, the fear of this no one, you know. You construct somebody out of this no one, and then this construction gets afraid, you know, afraid of being ill, afraid of dying, afraid of losing, afraid of whatever. So at some point you have to deal with fear. You know, you have to really look into yourself and say, why weren't you honest in that situation? You know, why couldn't you be generous? You see, this is where when you chant the paramis, is what they're called, the qualities, you, it's to wake you up. You know, why did you fail yourself? You know, why did you go against what your heart knows? Things like that. Not as a judgment, but just as a wake up call, you know? And you usually go back because I was afraid of whatever it is, you know? So we're constantly working through the fear of letting go, really, and of the truth.
How can we continue caring for others without being burned out with all this?
With difficulty. I mean, you know, I have met bodhisattvas, particularly among the doctors and nurses that I work with, you know, who have been burned out. But I have to add that it's usually from a mixture of not caring for themselves enough, you know, a lack of skill of how to take care of themselves. But even if you do, in the world as it is, you know, so sort of with such unhealthy vibrations and values, I think burnout is kind of almost natural, you know, at some point. But if you have the spiritual practices, you can perhaps help to prevent that. And when you do burn out, you can recover as well, you know. The sadness is when people who are doing amazing jobs, you know, and helping other people, they burn out and there's nobody to help them, and they've you know, they don't have the means, you know, so they quit their job and they stop doing the good work they do. I've met people like that too, who've been burnt out and become very hardened or cynical and sort of angry with the world and things like that, you know. And it's natural. But if you can keep going with the practices, this is where the practices come in, then you know, you can fall into despair every now and then. I definitely do. Oh, what's going on? What new war? You know, more children being, you know, homeless and killed and whatever. It's awful. You know, of course you're affected by it. You don't. Equanimity doesn't mean you're just like looking at it from a distance. You know, that's the paradox. You know, the more sensitive you become, the more conscious you become, the more affected you are, deeply affected. And of course, at some point or other, you know, the other thing to really be aware of, with all the things that are happening in the world, and things which in the you know, the work I do, is to remind people and remind myself before anybody else, not to fall into, you know, anger and hatred, you know, because you then become part of the problem. You know, you're adding to more anger and more hatred in the world, but you're also burning yourself out, literally, you know, through that. And this is not easy. This is not easy. You know, look at what's going on in the world now. You know, it's so easy to just be angry with the kind of politicians who send young men to kill people and so on. You know, but it's delicate, you know, and you've just got to persist. And if you know, and this is where consciousness comes into it again, if you're aware that, you know, once you get into that spiral of anger and, you know, despair, and you start really getting so negative about everything in the world, what are you doing to help? You know, you're part of the problem.
How do you explain compassion? Because some people express it as like trying to please others or total self-sacrifice. what is compassion? How do you express it? And can you be compassionate and say no at the same time?
Ooh, big question.
How do you distinguish genuine compassion from these patterns?
Compassion is with passion, right? With passion. With the passion, it's something that comes out of empathy first. Compassion grows out of empathy. Empathy is something we have with us. I've seen films about this, you know, of little children, really tiny children, recognizing when somebody's in trouble and wanting to help them, you know. So it's something which, and child psychologists will tell you this, you know, you see it in very young children already. And it's, well, they explain it, mirror neurons and things like that. You know, we're compassionate to animals, you know, we're compassionate to I mean, we're empathic, right? We can sense, I can sense your pain, okay? Compassion grows out of this. Compassion is, I want to do something about it. I want to do something about it. Now, this is where the difficulty comes. And I've seen this a lot in my work because I work a lot with professional burnout. You know. The empathy is there. The impulse to do something about this, to alleviate the pain I see in you is there. But when I try from me, you know, to do it, then it starts getting complicated. Because if you don't respond to that, let's say, you know, then I'm suffering, and I might withdraw that compassion. See? Whereas if I can be a channel of what we call compassion, then I don't have to keep generating that. I don't know whether I'm explaining myself very
Yes.
well, but compassion is something universal. You know, for me, it comes from the same source of consciousness, you know, that connects everything. Compassion is a kind of connection, that we're connected, you know, and our particular human consciousness is aware, really aware of that. And it's not just us. The whales, the elephants, the trees, you know, connect with each other. The universe connects us all. There's this sense of being connected, and this sense of not wanting to see something in pain, you know, not wanting to see an animal in pain. This is universal, you know, not wanting to see another human in pain. Of course, you can distort that, but through education or through whatever you've been taught, no, they're the enemy. So you can kill them, you know. But it actually goes against something very deep. I have worked alongside ex-soldiers, and I have worked with traumatized soldiers, you know, who are traumatized from what they've seen in war and everything, but also traumatized with what they have done. And this sense of going against something really deep in them, this deep sense, this consciousness, the Bodhi again, the essence that says, no, you know, you just hurt somebody. And this goes against something deep inside. This is the source of compassion, if you like. You know. But the point of all this is that to be compassionate is really to tap into this source. It's not something you have to try to be. actually, the less of you, the better, you know, because, you know, I've known cases where somebody says, "Oh, I'm fed up with so and so," you know, and you say, "Well, you just you've given up on them," you know, and they say, "Yes, you know, they just wouldn't, you know, parents of addict children and things like that, you know." Compassion, personal compassion, can freeze or can dry up. But if you can tap the source, then I think compassion can keep flowing, because the empathy is always there, the recognition. Unfortunately, the world doesn't live like that. So because we have enemies, we have the other, we have, you know, all the time.
How can an ordinary person cultivate the Bodhisattva qualities in everyday life?
Just by, I think it starts, in an ideal world, through education, as children, you know, as children already. How do you feel when your little cat died? How do you feel when your grandmother died, or whatever, you know? And to allow the heart to be a part of your being. See, the trouble with education, our education is here. It's preparing you for the factory, you know, preparing you to pay taxes and, you know, earn a living. But the heart is very neglected. Empathy, compassion, they can be included in education, you know. In a good education, they are. And then to base your life on that, because in the practice, as you know, we go back to the 4 qualities, you know. Every time we chant generosity, we go back to the compassion behind that. The compassion is here. This is the portal. This is where we channel the compassion. So it's this maintaining the connection with the heart and allowing the heart to keep growing, to keep knowing, to keep alive and cultivating, deepening. See? So that's the way, you know. And then it comes very easily. It comes very easily because the heart will know. The heart knows. The head gets confused, because you're told, no, you can't be kind to that person. They're the enemy. You know, they're a different race, different whatever, different religion. You know, that's the head. Little children don't have that. Little children aren't racist. They're taught to be racist by their parents, you know, or whatever.
So if we didn't have it as kids, can we cultivate it now?
It's always possible. It's
What
always
what
possible.
would be
The trigger?
the action that you would suggest someone to start with?
Kindness, really. Kindness. Start with kindness. Be kind. There's a writer called Henry James. You know. He was asked by his nephew, he said, because he was such a good writer and everything, and his nephew greatly respected him. He said, uncle, if you had just one advice, you know, what is it? And he said, Henry James said, be kind, be kind, be kind. And that's it. You know, just try and be kind. We don't live in a kind world, by the way. It's not kind. We're kind to the people we love. Barely, you know, barely, even in the families, you know. But kindness will lead us naturally to generosity, to living well, you know, straightforwardly, to renunciation, to sacrifice. If you're kind, you're willing to say, hey, have this coffee before me, you know. You see, kindness is our intelligence.
You have worked with refugees, with severely traumatized people. How has this Bodhisattva spirit helped you?
I just to remind me to keep awake, you know, to keep awake. And that the other thing helped me. It's helped me no end because, you know, it's given me this sense of purpose,
Of purpose.
of the sense. It's very important, you know, the sense of being alive. Not sort of, I have to do this, but, you know, particularly working with the children, the years I was working at the center in Bangkok, you know, I still retain that sense in my heart of seeing a child, one of the children who, you know, was rescued by one of our street workers and, you know, brought in, who'd been abused or abandoned or, you know, traumatized, you know, and then sort of gradually seeing him or her play again, talk again, dance again, sing again, you know. It's just much deeper pleasure than anything, you know, than having a, whatever, new pair of shoes. So it's not a sense of purpose, it's a sense of, you know, connection, you know, connection and the pleasure of contributing to somebody else's well-being or healing, you know. I don't see anything past that, you know. And of course, nature and of course our animals, like we both have, you know. But it's, you know, all the things that people run after, including me when I was young, they're so sort of empty of real, you know, it doesn't give you anything. You buy that, you can afford that, you get that. And the pleasure lasts for a few minutes, really, you know. It's like, you know, whereas, you know, you see somebody healing from their depression or something like that. And it's, yeah, really, it just feels wonderful.
So how can we respond in this world full of crisis and wars from this path?
Keep being kind and humor as well, you know. Humor has helped me a lot, you know. And humor is part of patience as well. You know, it's like, yeah, what do you expect? What are you expecting? You know, I use that term, the world that can't be fixed. You know, not be obsessed with like fixing the world. Everything's got to be right.
But the purpose is very important. So,
The purpose is,
and it's not clear to many people how to find the purpose.
yes. But when they do, you see, they, you know, people I've worked with, you know, alongside them, you know, and you know, you do a day's work, you feel great, and you go out and you have a beer together. Then the next day you do the same work, and you see the same. I'm talking about my country, you know, the corruption ruining things, you know, tourism and, you know, crazy desires and things like that. And you keep working and you keep doing it, you know, and you keep being patient too with yourself and with the world and with people. But I think most of all, you just, again, it sounds very sort of very weak, but you try your best. You try your best. That's the whole point, you know. It's a process, you know. This whole, we started off with this bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is somebody who just keeps trying, keeps trying. If you're attached to the end game, if you're attached to the result, you're going to suffer a lot. You know? Because look at the world. Instead of getting better, it seems to be getting worse and worse.
And it's a risk to become cynical and overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, very easy to keep the love and keep, you know, keep enjoying too, like enjoying simple things, not be conned into getting the complicated things. You know, the simple things that we can enjoy are mostly free. Look, look, the mountains, the light, the flowers, the birds flying, you know?
When was the moment in your life when you truly understood the meaning of the vows of the Bodhisattva and you committed?
Well, it was the end of my kind of crazy times, really, in the 60s, when I started being trained by Dhiravamsa, who was my second teacher. And he shared with me the vows as part of my training. And I really looked at them. I mean, I remember the first time chanting them with him and he translating them and explaining, you know, why the three levels and everything like that. Sort of saying, wow, I'm missing most of these. You know, I haven't, and it struck me as being such a challenge, you know, such a challenge. I didn't, when I chanted, I felt kind of, I kind of, was kind of embarrassed, you know, at how far away I was from them. I'm still not, I can't claim any, you know, I'm still working towards. I think that's the important thing about spirituality. That's why I wrote that in my Substack article. It's towards a spirituality. Don't claim something, you know. You know, we're working towards. And the other thing I do feel is that if each one of us who are committed to the path, working towards, we're doing it, this is in terms of Sheldrake's morphic resonance and everything. We're not just doing it for ourselves, you know, we're doing it for our collective, you know. So it doesn't need to be everybody kind of suddenly, you know, in a cult or a sect, you know, doing it. Just quietly working towards it.
Was there ever a time where you felt like you wanted to walk away from the path because?
Oh, I did. I did. I did. I can remember it very well. I just couldn't do it. I just felt burnt out. I just felt burnt out because it was still coming from me, you know, and I still felt all the contradictions. And I was trying to be a young father and a teacher and a compassionate person and all that, you know, and living in a community and all the problems that was, and I just couldn't do it. So I have been through burnout, and it was through the burnout, and not just once, that I discovered the importance of being the channel and not generating this, you know, not trying, just stop trying, but at the same time be very focused, you know, this intention, you know, so that you don't have to make this great effort to be correct and to always say the right things and give out the right teachings or whatever. Just to relax, you know, but at the same time be focused.
The bodhisattvas in your life, who were for you?
Who has been bodhisattva in my life? Oh, I could name you loads, but mostly they're Thai names, and it'd be complicated for you. People I've worked with in the slums, really. People I've worked with in the slums. I will name one who's the director of the Mercy Center now, Usani. She's called Usani. She is a nurse. She was trained in St. Thomas's in London, and she could have had a, you know, big career in Thailand. She chose to work in the slums. She came from the slums. She chose to work with the slums and selflessly, you know, and almost effortlessly, just really doing amazing. I worked with her during the AIDS time, in the beginning of the 2000s. AIDS had been ravaging the country already for quite a few years, and we had a center there with a hospice, where the AIDS people, the children and the adults came mainly to die, with us because they had no other resources. And I met her then, but not just her, the other people who just, were there doing what they were doing, just quietly, and just with kindness again, compassion.
If someone decided tomorrow to live as a bodhisattva, what would be the very first concrete step you should tell them?
First step? Well, you see, I'm a bit prejudiced here because it's part of my work, to try and transmit this. So if somebody says, look, I'm really fed up with my life, I'm really depressed, often it's because they're disconnected from themselves and from what they're doing around here. So I very often suggest to them, to do something that takes them outside of themselves. Help a neighbor, help one of their families who are in pain or something, And this act alone, will be challenging to somebody who's sort of so inside here. Oh, I'm going through this. I'm really anxious. Oh, I'm so mad at so and so. Just do something for somebody else. Just try it for a while. And I've seen it working. I've seen it working. People who have volunteered in the center. Sometimes they come and they're in a terrible state, because they've been living a life sort of so limited, to their needs, that they've forgotten that we're all connected. So that's the first step. That's the first step. And I think there's so much to do. I mean, this again, going back to Jane Goodall, she said, look, just think of what you can do, and do it. Do it. Don't just sit there and complain about the world. That's the easy part, Do something little, Collect some money for the children in Gaza, and make sure it gets to them, or whatever. And that will, join a food bank, work in a food bank. Do something. Don't just stay thinking. Do.
How can we embody compassion in our movement, in our breath? We can understand it as a notion, as an idea. How can we embody it?
Now you're getting technical.
I'm getting practical.
Practical,
because
okay.
Yes, we can understand, but how can we live it in the body?
Through the fascia. For me, that's the whole key. The fascia, the connective tissue, is conscious. This is, people tend to think that everything happens here. No. The body is conscious. The compassion is there in the body. It is to awaken that in the body, so that when you touch the ground, you don't take it for granted. You don't take it for granted. You really touch, and you really feel that connection to everything.
So
And that is through the fascia.
The body can become the vehicle for awakening.
It has to be. It has to be. The body is the spirit. It's not like spirit and body. The body, that's the mistake people make. The body is the spirit. So when we talk of forgiveness, let's say, which is part of compassion, you forgive in the body, through the body. You don't just do it here. You just do it here. It's kind of incomplete, and often there's a contradiction. You think you've forgiven somebody, but they still piss you off when when they come near you. You know, that's because the body. You have to, it has to be a holistic. And the way you do it holistically is through the fascia, through the connective tissue. So in your work, for example, without changing anything, but just shifting people's, intention, and saying, you're not just moving, by the way, you are breathing your connective tissue, and it's all in there. All your memories are in there. That's the whole point. All your traumas and your memories and everything's in there. I think in these years, the theme of the importance of the connective tissue will come to the fore very much. The two themes I feel are going to be much more relevant in terms of health. One is the connective tissue, the fascia, and the role of the fascia, which they're only just discovering, but it's been in Chinese medicine, by the way, for 2,000-3,000 years, And the other thing is vibration, the importance of vibration. If you talked about vibration 5-10 years ago, people were saying, "Oh, you're just an old hippie talking about good vibration, bad vibration." But now, we have established that our cells vibrate, and if our cells vibrate, we vibrate. We've always known this, really, but how to integrate that into the way of healing, into the way of into the way of being. How do we vibrate compassion instead of just believing in it? Right? And again, the vibration and the connective tissue for me are the same.
I want to focus on that because, yes, we can understand all this and read books and read and chant, but if we don't take action through the body and we don't put the body in the action,
then it's incomplete. Exactly. And that's where your work, that's where the Tai Chi and Qigong, to me, are essential. It's not just like, well, let's do a bit of body work. No, this is what's been neglected. And if you start from the body, with the body, then it actually makes it all easier
yes,
for the rest. But if you neglect the body and you think that, because I don't want to get too stuck in this, but Western culture is top down, because we give so much importance to the cognitive that it kind of controls and commands everything. Not exactly true. That's the whole point. And again, going back to the fascia is now treated as an organ. It's an organ, an intelligent organ, a conscious organ. Going back to Bodhi. The Bodhi is in the body.
a message that you would like to leave for the future generation.
Well, look, I haven't got any wise words. I'm going to quote Jane Goodall. Hope. Keep that strong, Hope, not sort of fantasy, Hope as energy. Do things hoping for the best. Hope for the best. And keep doing. Don't stop and get into despair and darkness. Doesn't help. Doesn't help you, doesn't help the world. Keep doing small things.
And keep the purpose alive.
Keep the purpose alive. That's hope. That's hope. Keep the purpose alive. And it's also faith. It's faith. It's not vague. It's really, just keep doing, like, keep planting little seeds. Do our best. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.